August 17th, 78 AD. The body of Gaius Flavius Marcellus, Rome's most celebrated gladiator, lies contorted in the underground chambers beneath the Colosseum. His skin has turned an unnatural shade of purple. His eyes, still open, reveal burst blood vessels. The imperial physician, Claudius Galen, kneels beside the corpse, noting the distinctive puncture wounds on the gladiator's left ankle. Small, almost insignificant marks that tell a story no one wants to hear. But these aren't the teeth marks of a wild beast from the arena above. They're something far more calculated, something domesticated. In the corner of Marcellus's private chamber, a silver cage sits open. Inside, the remnants of treated meat laced with concentrated hemlock. Outside the cage, a trail of bloody paw prints leads directly to where Marcellus collapsed. The creature responsible? A gray mongoose imported at tremendous expense from the markets of Alexandria, owned by Marcellus's scheduled opponent for that afternoon's grand spectacle. An opponent who stood to inherit a fortune if Marcellus never made it to the arena. But the truth was far more terrifying than a simple case of murder. Before we uncover the truth about the gladiators fighting Mongoose, how a poisoned exotic animal was weaponized for assassination in the heart of Imperial Rome, make sure to subscribe to the Silent Abbey and ring that notification bell. We bring you the darkest, most disturbing forgotten chapters from history's shadows every week. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers scattered across the globe, united by our fascination with humanity's darkest moments. Now let's descend into the blood-soaked depths beneath the Colosseum. Rome, 78 AD. Emperor Vespasian has been dead for 2 years, and his son Titus now sits upon the imperial throne. The Flavian dynasty seeks to cement its legitimacy through spectacle and bloodshed. The Colosseum, Vespasian's gift to the Roman people, has become the beating heart of the empire's entertainment apparatus, a stone testament to Rome's dominance over man and beast alike. The gladiatorial games have evolved far beyond simple combat. They are complex productions, involving exotic animals from every corner of the known world, elaborate staged hunts called venations, and carefully orchestrated executions that blur the line between justice and theater. Fortunes are won and lost on these blood-soaked sands. Gladiators themselves, though technically slaves or criminals, can achieve wealth and fame rivaling senators. Beneath the Colosseum's arena floor lies a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical lifts called the hypogeum. Here, in this underground city of the damned, gladiators prepare for combat, exotic animals pace in reinforced cages, and stage managers orchestrate the brutal performances above. The hypogeum operates as its own society, governed by unofficial codes and dark hierarchies that the sunlit world above prefers not to examine too closely. Gaius Flavius Marcellus is the undisputed king of this netherworld, a free man who fights by choice rather than compulsion. He has survived 43 matches in arenas across the empire. His particular specialty is fighting exotic predators. He has killed lions from Numidia, bears from Germania, and once, in an exhibition that became legendary, a fully grown leopard using only a short gladius and a wooden shield. Patricians pay fortunes to secure his appearance at their private games. Women of noble families send him scented letters and expensive gifts, scandalizing polite society. But success breeds enemies, particularly in an environment where death is the primary form of advancement. Marcus Licinius Quintus arrives in Rome in the spring of 78 AD with a reputation as a rising gladiator from the provincial circuits in Hispania. Younger than Marcellus by a decade, handsome in the classical style, and backed by the considerable wealth of Senator Publius Licinius, his supposed patron, though rumored by many to be his biological father. Quintus represents everything the aging Marcellus must inevitably face: obsolescence. The match between Marcellus and Quintus is announced for the August Games celebrating the 2nd anniversary of Titus's ascension. The betting houses along the Tiber go into a frenzy. Not since the days of Spartacus has Rome seen such anticipation for single combat. The odds favor Marcellus, but only slightly. His experience against Quintus's youth and fresh training, the veteran against the challenger. But in the weeks leading up to the scheduled combat, something begins to shift in the atmosphere beneath the Colosseum. Marcellus's behavior becomes erratic. He refuses to train with his usual partners. He complains of headaches and moments of confusion. His sleep, fellow gladiators report, is troubled by violent nightmares. And Quintus, impossibly, seems to know details about Marcellus's private life that should be impossible for a newcomer to access. the name of Marcellus's childhood trainer, the specific prayer Marcellus offers before combat, the location of a small scar on Marcellus's ribs from a practice bout gone wrong in his youth. How does Quintus possess such intimate knowledge? The answer lies in something far smaller and far more cunning than anyone suspects. 3 weeks before the scheduled match, Quintus makes a public show of visiting Marcellus in his private chamber beneath the arena. Witnesses record that he brings an unusual peace offering, a gray mongoose in an ornate silver cage, a creature imported from Egypt specifically for this purpose. Quintus explains that the mongoose is a token of respect between warriors, a creature known in Eastern lands for its ability to kill serpents, symbolic of defeating one's enemies. Marcellus, flattered and perhaps caught off guard by the gesture, accepts the gift. The mongoose is unusual, neither fully tame nor entirely wild. It responds to Quintus's commands with eerie precision, following hand signals that seem practiced, almost rehearsed. What Marcellus doesn't notice, but what a slave named Tycho later testifies to during the investigation, is the small leather pouch Quintus discreetly places near the mongoose's cage as he departs. Inside this pouch, specially prepared strips of dried meat, treated with a substance Tycho cannot identify but describes as having a bitter metallic smell. 2 weeks before the match, during Marcellus's morning training session, the mongoose escapes its cage. The incident appears accidental. The cage latch is found open, possibly improperly secured by a careless slave. But the animal's behavior is remarkably focused. Rather than fleeing into the maze of tunnels, it moves directly toward Marcellus's training area. When cornered by handlers attempting to recapture it, the mongoose becomes violently aggressive, biting one handler severely enough to require medical attention from the arena's physician. The wound, though small, produces an unusually severe reaction. The handler develops a high fever within hours and experiences hallucinations before recovering 3 days later. Marcellus insists the mongoose be kept despite the incident, claiming the creature's spirit reminds him of his own fighting nature. This decision, seemingly a point of masculine pride, plays directly into what investigators later determine was Quintus's plan all along. 10 days before the match, Marcellus begins experiencing episodes of illness. He attributes them to bad oysters from a tavern near the Forum, a common enough occurrence in Rome's sweltering August heat. But the symptoms are peculiar. Intense headaches accompanied by visual disturbances. He reports seeing halos around torches and candles, muscle weakness that comes and goes without pattern, a tremor in his right hand that affects his sword grip. The arena's physician examines him and finds nothing obviously wrong. Marcellus's pulse is strong, his color good. The physician prescribes rest and a diet of bland foods. What he doesn't recognize, because the knowledge simply doesn't exist in 78 AD Rome, is that Marcellus is experiencing the early stages of systematic poisoning. During this period, Quintus visits Marcellus twice more, always bringing small gifts, dried fruits from Hispania, honeyed wine, once a small bronze statue of Mars. Each visit, he spends time near the mongoose's cage, appearing to admire the creature while discreetly leaving additional treated meat within the animal's reach. 5 nights before the scheduled match, a guard named Cassius Lucius is making his rounds through the hypogeum's residential section when he hears unusual sounds coming from Marcellus's chamber. He describes them in his later testimony as a low hissing, like water on hot coals, and then what sounded like a man's sharp intake of breath, followed by cursing. Cassius knocks but receives no answer. He opens the door to find Marcellus sitting on his sleeping couch, holding his left leg, with the mongoose circling the room in what the guard describes as a deliberate pattern, like it was hunting something only it could see. Marcellus's ankle bears fresh marks, 2 small punctures surrounded by reddened skin. He laughs off the guard's concern, saying the creature must have been startled in its sleep and lashed out defensively. He refuses medical attention. This is the warrior's arrogance that will cost him his life, a refusal to show weakness, even in private, even over something as seemingly minor as an animal bite. What Cassius doesn't report until much later, during intense questioning by Imperial investigators, is that he saw something else that night. As he closed Marcellus's door, he glanced down the corridor and saw a figure in a dark cloak standing in the shadows near the entrance to the animal storage area. The figure didn't move or speak. When Cassius called out, asking who was there, the figure vanished into the deeper tunnels. Cassius assumed it was another gladiator or perhaps a handler working late. But the posture, the way the figure stood watching Marcellus's door with what seemed like intentional interest, these details haunt Cassius afterward. In his final testimony, he swears that the figure's build and height matched Marcus Licinius Quintus perfectly. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button to help more people discover these forgotten horrors from history. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries and true stories that textbooks deliberately leave out. Let's discover what happens next in the final days before the match that never was. August 17th, 78 AD. Dawn breaks over the Colosseum with Rome's inhabitants already gathering for the afternoon's spectacular match. Vendors set up stalls selling wine, honeyed pastries, and commemorative tokens bearing crude images of both Marcellus and Quintus. The betting has reached a fever pitch. Some estimates suggest that over 2 million sesterces are wagered on the outcome, enough wealth to feed a small city for a year. Beneath the arena in the Gladiator's preparation area, Marcus Licinius Quintus performs his pre-combat rituals with practiced calm. He oils his body, checks his weapons, and offers prayers to Mars and Fortuna. Several witnesses later report that he seems almost unnaturally relaxed, even cheerful for a man about to face Rome's most deadly gladiator. At the 6th hour of the morning, a slave named Decimus is sent to fetch Marcellus for his own preparation rituals. Standard procedure dictates that both combatants begin their physical and mental preparation 4 hours before the scheduled combat time. Decimus knocks on Marcellus's door. No response. He knocks again, louder. Still nothing. Fighting the first tendrils of fear, failing to wake a gladiator before an important match is a failure punishable by flogging. Decimus opens the door. The scene he discovers will haunt him for the remaining years of his life. Gaius Flavius Marcellus lies on the stone floor between his sleeping couch and the Mongoose's silver cage. His body is twisted in what the imperial physician will later describe as a position of extreme agony, the back arched, the limbs rigid, the facial features locked in a rictus of suffering. The gladiator's skin has turned a distinctive purplish hue, particularly around his extremities. His eyes remain open, the whites stained red from ruptured blood vessels. Foam has dried at the corners of his mouth. Decimus's screams bring guards running from 3 different sections of the hypogeum. Within minutes, Claudius Galen, the imperial physician assigned to the games, arrives at the scene. Galen has seen death in countless forms, arena injuries, disease, execution, but something about Marcellus's corpse disturbs him immediately. The color, the rigidity, the expression of agony, these are not characteristic of natural death or even most violent deaths he's encountered. He notices the wounds on Marcellus's left ankle immediately, 2 distinct punctures, now surrounded by blackened skin that spreads in web-like patterns up the gladiator's leg. The flesh around the wounds has begun to necrotize, tissue death that should take days to develop, yet appears to have occurred in mere hours. Galen's attention shifts to the silver cage. The mongoose is dead as well, lying on its side in a pool of its own vomit and excrement. Near the cage's entrance, Galen finds the partially consumed remains of meat strips that give off the same bitter metallic smell that the slave Tycho had noted weeks earlier. But there's something else. Using a cloth to protect his hands, Galen is a learned man, educated in the medical traditions of Alexandria, and he understands that some poisons can be absorbed through skin. He examines the cage more carefully. Hidden beneath the bedding material, he finds a small clay vial, unstoppered, containing a thick, oily residue. He carefully lifts the vial and sniffs. The odor is unmistakable to anyone trained in Alexandrian medicine. Concentrated hemlock extract, the same poison used in the execution of Socrates 5 centuries earlier, but here refined and intensified to a degree Galen has never encountered. The pieces begin to assemble in Galen's mind with horrible clarity. The mongoose, trained to consume the poisoned meat. The meat, laced with sublethal doses of hemlock to weaken Marcellus over time, while also building a toxic concentration in the animal's saliva and venom glands, if such glands exist in mongooses, which Galen isn't certain about, but the evidence before him suggests they must. The final bite, delivering a massive dose of concentrated poison directly into Marcellus's bloodstream, and the mongoose itself, succumbing to the cumulative poison it had been ingesting for weeks. A murder weapon that consumes itself. Elegant, horrifying, utterly unprecedented. Galen immediately orders Marcellus's chamber sealed. No one enters or exits. He sends urgent word to the office of the urban prefect. This is no longer a matter for arena officials. This is assassination, and given the high-profile nature of both victim and likely perpetrator, it will require investigation at the highest levels of imperial authority. Within 3 hours of the discovery, urban prefect Lucius Flavius Sabinus, second cousin to the Emperor Titus himself, arrives at the Colosseum with a full investigative retinue. The scheduled match is cancelled, causing riots among the gathered crowds who feel cheated of their entertainment. The Praetorian Guard must be deployed to maintain order as disappointed spectators clash with vendors over refunds for purchased goods. But beneath the arena, a different kind of drama unfolds. Marcus Licinius Quintus is arrested immediately, though he protests his innocence with convincing vehemence. "Why would I kill him before we fought?" he demands. "My reputation, my entire fou tuere, depended on defeating him honorably in the arena. His death before combat makes me look like a coward who feared to face him." It's a compelling argument, and one that initially gives the investigators pause. In the gladiatorial world, reputation is everything. A victory over a murdered opponent would be worse than a loss to a living one. It would destroy Quintus's career before it truly began. But Prefect Sabinus is not a man easily swayed by surface arguments. He orders a comprehensive investigation into every detail of the 3 weeks leading up to Marcellus's death. What emerges paints a picture of premeditation so elaborate it suggests not just Quintus's guilt, but the involvement of someone with significant resources and knowledge. Imperial accountants examine Quintus's financial records and make several disturbing discoveries. 2 months before his arrival in Rome, Quintus received a massive payment from Senator Publius Licinius, his patron, totaling 500,000 sesterces, an astronomical sum equivalent to the annual salary of a provincial governor. The stated purpose: preparation expenses for Roman debut, but follow-up questioning of merchants reveals that Quintus spent only a fraction of this amount on legitimate preparation costs. Where did the rest go? Investigators trace payments to several suspicious sources: a merchant in Alexandria who specializes in exotic animals and poisons, who confirms selling Quintus both the mongoose and detailed instructions for training it, along with a supply of hemlock extract refined using Egyptian techniques unknown in Rome. A corrupt arena guard who received payments to provide Quintus with detailed information about Marcellus's routines, his chamber location, and his personal habits. A prostitute who had been one of Marcellus's lovers, who provided intimate details about the gladiator's superstitions, his prayers, his childhood history. All the personal information Quintus had used to unnerve Marcellus in their pre-match encounters. Claudius Galen conducts a revolutionary investigative procedure that will later influence Roman forensic practices for decades. He performs what might be the empire's first documented toxicological autopsy, systematically examining Marcellus's organs to trace the poison's path and timeline. He removes samples of Marcellus's liver, his stomach contents, his blood, and most tellingly, tissue from around the bite wound on his ankle. Using a technique borrowed from Egyptian embalming practices, he preserves these samples in natron solution for extended study. His findings are damning. Marcellus's liver shows signs of chronic low-level poisoning dating back at least 2 weeks, consistent with the timeline of his mysterious illness. His stomach contains partially digested food mixed with trace amounts of hemlock. But most significantly, the tissue around the bite wound contains hemlock concentrations so massive that Galen calculates death would have occurred within 2 to 3 hours of the bite. The mongoose's body reveals an equally disturbing story. Its organs are saturated with hemlock. Its stomach contains not just the poisoned meat found in the cage, but also traces of treated meat dating back weeks, evidence of systematic, long-term conditioning. Galen presents a formal report to Prefect Sabinus that reads like something from a medical horror text. The deceased was systematically weakened over a period of weeks through chronic poisoning, administered via contaminated meat consumed by his pet mongoose, which then transferred trace amounts through saliva during normal interaction. The final lethal dose was delivered through a deliberate bite from the now fully poisoned animal, which itself died from toxic accumulation shortly after administering the fatal wound. Under intensive interrogation, which in Rome includes torture for lower-class witnesses, the conspiracy's full scope emerges. The Alexandrian merchant, facing imperial charges, confesses to providing not just the mongoose and poison but detailed written instructions in Greek on the precise dosing schedule needed to condition the animal without killing it prematurely. The prostitute, granted immunity in exchange for testimony, reveals that Senator Publius Licinius promised her enough money to retire from her profession if she could extract and provide personal information about Marcellus. She describes meeting with Quintus multiple times to relay this information, always in secret, always with the clear understanding that it would be used to give Quintus a psychological advantage in the upcoming match. But the most damning testimony comes from the corrupt guard Cassius Lucius, the same guard who had witnessed the midnight incident in Marcellus's chamber. Under pressure, he admits to being paid not just for information but for deliberately leaving Marcellus's chamber door unlocked on specific nights. These nights, he now realizes, coincided with Quintus's clandestine visits to leave additional poisoned meat for the Mongoose. Cassius breaks down during interrogation, describing how Quintus had approached him with what seemed like a simple request, just information about a competitor, the kind of intelligence gathering that was common in the gladiatorial world. The payments started small, then they grew larger. Then Quintus asked for access to Marcellus's chamber just to study how the champion prepared to learn from the master. By the time Cassius understood he was facilitating murder, he was too complicit to withdraw. Roman law in 78 AD makes no provision for murder by poisoned animal. It's simply too unprecedented. The prosecution must argue the case under general homicide statutes, which typically require proof of direct action by the killer's hand. Quintus's defense advocates seize on this, arguing that even if Quintus provided the mongoose and poisoned meat, he couldn't have controlled when or whether the animal would bite Marcellus. Therefore, they claim, any death was accidental, not premeditated murder. It's a clever legal argument, and for several days it appears it might succeed. Roman law is notoriously strict about proof requirements, and the case's unusual nature works in Quintus's favor. But Prefect Sabinus has one more piece of evidence, discovered through methodical investigation of Quintus's chamber. Hidden in a false bottom of Quintus's traveling trunk, investigators find a journal written in Quintus's own hand. The entries, dated from the day he received the mongoose from the Alexandrian merchant, detail every step of the murder plot. Day 1, the creature accepts the treated meat. The Alexandrian's methods prove sound. Day 8, first delivery to M's chamber successful. The fool suspects nothing, enamored of the gift and what it represents. Day 15, M shows signs of chronic exposure, headaches, weakness. The foundation is laid. Day 19, perfect. The beast bit him. Cassius confirms M refused treatment. 2 more days of feeding and the final dose will be sufficient. The final entry, dated August 16th, the day before Marcellus's death, is chillingly simple. Tomorrow, the mongoose delivers justice. By evening, I will be Rome's greatest gladiator without having struck a single blow. With this evidence, the defense collapses. Quintus is convicted not just of murder, but of murder committed through particularly heinous and dishonorable means. The presiding magistrate's judgment includes language that will be quoted in Roman legal text for centuries. To kill without the courage to face one's victim in honest combat, to use poison and subterfuge where honor demands open conflict, to transform the gift of tribute into an engine of assassination. These acts transcend simple murder and enter the realm of moral abomination. Marcus Licinius Quintus is sentenced to damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. It's a form of execution typically reserved for the lowest criminals, and its apple. Ication to a gladiator represents a deliberate inversion of what Quintus had sought to achieve. Rather than glory in the arena, he will die there as entertainment, torn apart by the same kinds of exotic predators that Marcellus had built his reputation defeating. On September 3, 78 AD, before a capacity crowd at the Colosseum, Quintus is led into the arena unarmed and unarmored. 3 starved lions are released from the hypogeum below, emerging from the same tunnels where Quintus had once crept to leave poisoned meat in a silver cage. Contemporary accounts describe that Quintus attempts to fight, using his gladiatorial training to evade the lions for several minutes, perhaps hoping for the crowd's mercy or the emperor's reprieve. Neither comes. The crowd, denied their anticipated match between 2 skilled warriors, shows no sympathy for the man who denied them that spectacle through cowardice and poison. His death takes approximately 20 minutes. Historians note that Emperor Titus refuses to grant the traditional signal for a quick death, instead allowing the lions to take their time. It's both justice and spectacle, the very combination that defines Roman arena culture. The investigation into Senator Licinius proceeds more delicately. He is, after all, a member of the Senate, and Emperor Titus must balance justice against political stability. The evidence of his financial involvement is clear, but proving he knew the specific purpose of the payments proves more difficult. After weeks of political maneuvering, a compromise is reached. Senator Licinius is not formally charged with conspiracy to murder. That would require a Senate trial that could create dangerous political precedents. Instead, he is quietly forced to resign his Senate seat and go into permanent exile in Corsica, forfeiting the majority of his fortune to the imperial treasury. In private letters preserved in imperial archives, Titus writes to a trusted advisor, "We know the father armed the son with money for murder, but proving knowledge versus proving suspicion are different matters. Let him live with the shame of exile. His name is destroyed, his line ended, that is punishment enough." The murder of Gaius Flavius Marcellus sends shockwaves through Roman society that extend far beyond the arena. Within 6 months of Quintus's execution, Emperor Titus orders the creation of new legal classifications for assassination through unconventional means. The Lex Titiana de Beneficiis Exoticis, the Titian law concerning exotic poisons, specifically addresses murder committed through trained animals, exotic toxins, and other methods that fall outside traditional homicide frameworks. The law establishes several important precedents. First, that training an animal to deliver poison constitutes direct action by the trainer, eliminating the defense that Quintus's advocates had attempted. Second, that obtaining exotic poisons or animals with clearly lethal applications creates a presumption of murderous intent. Third, that conspirators who provide financial or material support for such murders bear equal guilt with the actual perpetrator. These legal principles influence Roman jurisprudence for the remaining 4 centuries of the Western Empire, and are eventually incorporated into Byzantine law codes that survive into the medieval period. The Colosseum's management implements sweeping new security protocols. All exotic animals entering the facility must be registered with imperial authorities. Gladiators are forbidden from keeping personal animals in their chambers. Gifts between gladiators, previously a common practice representing martial respect, must be approved and inspected by arena officials. The position of official inspector of beasts is created, staffed by individuals trained in both animal handling and toxicology. These inspectors have authority to examine any animal in the arena complex, and to order the destruction of any creature suspected of being poisoned or otherwise weaponized. Perhaps most significantly, the hypogeum's residential areas are restructured. The previous system, where gladiators lived in individual chambers with minimal supervision, is replaced with a more communal, heavily monitored arrangement. Guards are posted at all hours. Movements are tracked and logged. These changes fundamentally alter the culture of the gladiatorial community. The hypogeum transforms from a lawless subterranean city into a regimented military installation. Many gladiators resent the loss of privacy and autonomy, but others welcome the increased security. The murder of Marcellus has demonstrated that even the greatest warriors are vulnerable to weapons they cannot fight. Claudius Galen's autopsy of Marcellus represents a watershed moment in Roman forensic medicine. His systematic documentation of poison's effects on human organs, his preservation of tissue samples for extended study, his methodical tracing of toxic substances through the body, these techniques become foundational to Roman medical jurisprudence. Galen publishes a treatise titled De Venenis et Eorum Indicatores, on poisons and their indicators, that becomes required reading for imperial physicians across the empire. The text includes detailed descriptions of hemlock poisoning, methods for detecting various toxins in corpse tissues, and protocols for investigating suspected poisoning deaths. The broader medical community takes notice. Physicians in Alexandria, Athens, and other centers of learning begin corresponding with Galen, sharing their own observations of poison cases. A systematic study of toxicology emerges from these collaborations, representing one of the ancient world's most significant advances in forensic science. The nature of Marcellus's murder, a warrior killed not in glorious combat but through domestic treachery, strikes at the very heart of what Romans believe gladiatorial games represent. The arena is supposed to be a space where virtue, courage, and skill determine outcomes. It embodies Roman ideals of honest confrontation and earned glory. Quintus's use of poison and subterfuge violates these core values. His crime is seen not just as murder, but as a profanation of the arena's sacred purpose. In the months following his execution, poets and philosophers write extensively about the case, using it as a lens to examine Roman virtues and vices. The poet Marcus Valerius Martialis composes an epigram that becomes widely quoted: "Better to fall beneath an honest blade than win through poison's coward scheme. The warrior's death brings eternal fame, the poisoner's victory, eternal shame." Attendance at gladiatorial games actually increases in the year following Marcellus's death. Romans flock to the arena with renewed appreciation for what it represents: honest combat in a world full of dishonest dealings. The games become a ritual affirmation of values that daily life often contradicts. Galen's investigation methods inspire review of other suspicious deaths in the arena community. Imperial authorities examine records from the previous decade, looking for patterns that might indicate similar assassination attempts. They find them. At least 7 other gladiator deaths previously attributed to natural causes or training accidents show characteristics consistent with poisoning. None are as elaborate or well documented as Marcellus's murder, but the pattern is unmistakable. In one particularly disturbing case from 74 AD, A gladiator named Spurius Maelius died 3 days before a scheduled match against an opponent who subsequently inherited a substantial gambling debt Maelius had held. The death was originally attributed to a virulent fever, but re-examination of preserved medical records reveals symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning. The realization that Quintus's crime is not an isolated incident, but possibly part of a broader pattern of arena assassinations, leads to additional reforms. Gladiatorial betting is more heavily regulated. The financial relationships between gladiators and their patrons receive greater scrutiny. The entire economic ecosystem surrounding the games comes under imperial oversight. The case of the gladiator fighting Mongoose offers a disturbing window into the depths of human calculation and cruelty. Quintus didn't act in passion or rage, emotions that Romans understood and even, in certain contexts, respected. His crime required months of planning, the corruption of multiple individuals, and the systematic torture of an animal transformed into an unwitting murder weapon. What drives a man to such elaborate evil? The investigation reveals that Quintus genuinely believed he could achieve greatness through shortcuts and schemes, rather than honest effort. Letters found in his possessions show a pattern of narcissism and entitlement. He viewed Marcellus not as a worthy opponent, but as an obstacle unfairly blocking his destiny. This psychology, the belief that one deserves success without earning it, that rules apply to others but not to oneself, resonates across centuries. The specific methods change, but the underlying human corruption remains constant. The mongoose itself becomes a symbol in Roman culture, representing how innocent things can be perverted into instruments of evil. Several plays written in the years following the murder feature mongooses as metaphors for hidden corruption. The phrase "beware the gift mongoose" enters Latin as a proverbial warning against seemingly generous offers with hidden malice. Perhaps most tellingly, the case forces Romans to confront uncomfortable questions about their society's values. If the arena is supposed to represent the triumph of virtue and skill, what does it mean that it attracted schemes like Quintus's? If gladiatorial combat is Rome's truest expression of honor, why does it exist within an economic system that incentivizes dishonor? These questions don't have easy answers. The games continue, but with a shadow of moral ambiguity that never quite dissipates. The murder of Marcellus becomes a reference point, invoked whenever Romans debate the relationship between their ideals and their realities. What do you think drove Marcus Licinius Quintus to devise such an elaborate cold-blooded murder? Was it pure ambition, or something darker? Perhaps the corrupting influence of a society that valued victory at any cost? Leave your theories in the comments below. Our community always provides fascinating psychological insights into these historical figures, and here's a question worth considering. How many other arena deaths in Rome's 4th-century gladiatorial tradition were actually murders disguised as accidents or natural causes? The systematic review after Marcellus's death found at least 7 suspicious cases. How many more went undetected? If you found this journey into ancient Rome's darkest corners compelling, subscribe for more lost chapters of history that reveal humanity's capacity for both brilliance and horror. We explore forgotten murders, unexplained deaths, and conspiracies from across human civilization. Next week, we're investigating another case of animal-facilitated assassination. This one from 16th century Florence, involving a doctored parrot and a Medici banking rival. You won't want to miss it. Until then, remember, the most dangerous predators don't always have fangs and claws. Sometimes they have plans. See you in the next video.